the New Zealand Tech Podcast, brought to you by Gorilla Technology, proactive and strategic IT.
One of the things that interested me and chatting with you, is that Tourism Holdings is one of those entities that has been so important to New Zealand for a really long time. But also, if you're looking for companies that have been sucker punched by COVID, then tourism's kind of right there in the middle.
Absolutely.
Very, very pleased to chat. Well, we'll start off as usual, sort of, delve through some of the tech happenings and the tech news of the week, and we'll look forward to, hearing your insights on the world of tourism holdings.
Sounds good to me.
So on. So first up, a little thank you to our show partners, of course, 2 Degrees, Vodafone, Spark, HP, Gorilla Technology, Cyclone, and Aruba, and it's their support that helps us keep the show going and produced so nicely. So thank you to Joe Allen behind the scenes for keeping us rolling and streaming and getting the audio done. Very much appreciated. Now, always things going on within tech in New Zealand, isn't there? And it's sometimes you miss out on all sorts of things that are happening. But a couple of things that popped up this week. One is that we now have vertical farming going on in New Zealand. And this is something that's very much sort of, technology enabled in terms of what they're doing. I saw stuff covering this off with indoor farming company 26 Seasons. And they've got this indoor farm in Foxton, and they've been selling strawberries since July, which is kind of not your usual time of year for growing strawberries.
My kids would like that.
Yeah, well, you apply technology, and then you can do things that might not normally be so easy to do it. Look, I guess we've had greenhouses, and there's been a level of technology applied within agriculture since sort of year dot, hasn't there really? But it's just great to see new things going on within the country, and technology continuing to be applied, because definitely this time of year things like strawberries, which some of us quite enjoy, and trying to tell my son that no, we're not buying those strawberries at $12 a punnet or whatever they were last time I looked, and they don't look that great anyway.
They're tiny.
If we can apply some tech to that, it's kind of cool.
Oh, it's phenomenal. Just the AI and the machine learning that's obviously being put to good use. And, it's all about that climate, isn't it? And controlling and providing those new opportunities. So, I had read that as well. And I was like, oh, what are they going to look like? I mean, are they going to look natural? And they are, right? That's the reality. And obviously they're just replacing it with LED lights. But, I'm really interested to see where this goes with more of the crops, because to your point, we want these vegetables. There's that point where we're trying to be more healthy, but we're restrained by what's available to us and what we can afford. So if this helps that, and it increases the availability and helps with climate change, I'm all for it. I think it's great, and it's good to see companies doing that. And It's fascinating what robots are up to these days, really, isn't it?
Yeah, well, actually, I saw a video in the last few days of, and I think this one was in Europe, and it was, I guess you've got it was a fruit picking robot, and looked like it was picking apples. Don't know if you've seen this one, but there was basically they had a lot of these vehicles going through the orchard, and it used drones, but the drones were tethered, so you didn't have a battery issue because basically they were keeping just within a few meters of the vehicle, so you had plenty of juice. They could basically run 24/7. They would be using um, machine learning, and they would know which were the right apples. They would pick the right ones, and then gently sort of drop them from the drone into the collecting sort of tray, and then they would just go and find another one, and tethered to one vehicle. I don't know how many drones there were, but probably at least four tethered, and then across the footage looked like some pretty big orchard, and they had multiple of these, and the sorts of issues I guess we're solving are, a lot of fruit just drops to the ground and rots, right? And part of that is there seems to be less interest today from people in wanting to do those seasonal jobs rather than something that's consistent year round. While we don't have so many
Oh,
tourists in
it's
New
hard
Zealand or
labor.
other places and so on, I mean, there's a whole lot of reasons, right?
Mm,
So
mm.
seeing the technologies continually applied, new innovations coming through, I think it's really cool, and I think we're going to need more of this sort of stuff in New Zealand, and there's a lot that we probably don't hear about, bits and pieces I've seen, and you think, oh, that hasn't been covered. So we probably need to cover a bit more of that on the show. Actually, talk to a few of these, inventors and the companies that are at the cutting edge, because it's so important to our future.
Oh, absolutely. And as you say, times have changed, right? You're going cherry picking in the summer times, or that being your job. It's like, well, people want a bit
Yeah.
more opportunity and more money that comes with it as well. So if you
Yep.
can move this to AI and machine learning, great.
Yeah.
Be interesting to watch.
Now, M2X, they won the award at the High Tech Awards this year, the High Tech most innovative high tech agritech solution, and I saw a little bit of coverage for them as well, on their transportation solution, and the coverage was in Otago Daily Times talking about silver fern farms being on track to cut the distance travelled by their transport fleets, who are moving their product around the country, by 1 million kilometres a year. So there's just so many areas where we can apply a bit of that Kiwi ingenuity and some technology and make a real difference.
Oh, absolutely. And I actually went on their website and watched the story, and it was some examples from the team that were going to use this new software. And what I really liked wasn't just what the software was doing, but how they went about engaging, with the drivers who were very
Mm,
hesitant. They're kind of like, what are you lot doing here? What can you possibly do for us? And just seeing that journey that they went on with, the end users, that customer, was phenomenal. And you could see that in the passion coming out when obviously they got the final result. So, and I think that's something we always forget is yes, there's the software and look at this, it's doing such amazing things, but there's a massive journey. And a hard part of that is taking the team on that journey with you, and that change management part, for that
mm,
buy-in. So
mm.
kudos to them. It was a really amazing story to watch on their website, and the savings and the efficiency that's coming out of it. I know, at Tourism Holdings, we have our own in-house fleet management system that we're building, and it's all about that. It's all about driving efficiencies and freeing up time for other opportunities. So, yeah, that one was of real interest to me, but I particularly like the fact that it was about the people and the customer and
Yeah.
the right result at the end all around.
Yep. Yep. Now, other news, other things going on. I saw coverage that Meta Facebook, I think, is what we usually, call them, but the bigger company is now called Meta. Are going to be creating a customer service division to assist people who have lost their accounts. Imagine that, actually caring about your customers, those that turn you into one of the biggest companies on the planet. I have occasionally been vocal in the mainstream media, talking about this on radio and TV, and how just shocking it is that Facebook can be just so lacking in looking after their clients, and story after story of people that have had. Some of these are people that are doing a considerable amount of business with Facebook, right? So it's yes, sometimes it's just a friend who's clicked on something and has got sucked in and has somehow given somebody access to take over their account. I went through looking at that for somebody recently, and there was absolutely no assistance that could help at where this one had got to, because somebody else had taken it over. They changed the email address and so on. And when you're at that sort of point, there was no way back. There was no, pay this fee. There were just zero useful options. Now, the only way I've found to help someone in the past is through some, media channels, and sort of prod somebody. And even then, Facebook hasn't really had. I mean, if we're talking within the business context and something goes wrong with some data and database or whatever system, there's a way to roll back to how it was before, right? Well, with Facebook, it doesn't look like that. So yeah, a friend of mine, he had his band, he had his his own business, he was advertising on Facebook, he lost control. Working through the contacts that I had, he was able to get his account back, and eventually was able to get back sort of partly into those other accounts. But those accounts have been changed. His business had been renamed to something else, was now promoting something else. There was no undo, no rollback to how it was before the hackers. I mean, it beggars belief that these things can be so bad.
That's what I mean. I'm astounded. When I saw that, I was like, what? They're only just putting customer services in now? And then, to your point, you've got some contacts. Other people were paying these high-profile lawyers and hackers to try and get their accounts back. I'm like, that's pretty extreme to go and get your account back. So, I must admit, I don't use Facebook a lot. I don't need to use it. So when I did read that, I just thought, for a company your size with that many customers and that much information about your customers, you've really found yourself in this position, was quite disappointing. So hopefully, the customer services makes a difference. Again, we're putting in customer service. What you want to actually see is the results, right? So it'll be interesting to watch the space. But I was absolutely astounded by that, and just the level that the customers were going to get their accounts back. It's really disappointing.
Yeah, I guess my hope, because look, I know some people just say, look, I refuse to deal with Meta or Facebook as a company, and I won't have any accounts on their system. But realistically, they're a very, very big player. A lot of us use them for one thing or another. What I want them to do is to get some empathy, and this suggests to me that maybe they're at that point where they realize, actually, you've got to treat people right if you're going to succeed in the longer term. Yes, they had incredible growth and incredible success, but now their lunch is getting somewhat eaten. Sometimes things have to get a little bit hard before they get better, and let's hope they get better for Facebook.
Everything comes back to the customer. Like, you can't lose sight of that. You can't lose sight. So
many will remember when Microsoft became, there was a period there they just got more and more sort of arrogant as a business, and I think they figured out how to go through a change. And I know some people still have a huge dislike for anything Microsoft, and I guess that's what you create when when you allow your business to to lack empathy
And,
and to get arrogant.
well,
Like
and
that.
greed takes over,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
that's
yeah,
obviously the challenge as well. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see, and hopefully there's some good results.
yeah.
I just didn't realize how frequent it was either, but you're right, they're so far reaching on a grand scale of things. This is actually something big they need to fix.
Mm, mm. Now, this next thing I think is, I don't know, it just seems mind-blowingly huge, and I didn't see a lot of coverage on, and maybe it's because I don't, consume enough of more traditional media, but it seemed to be more tech media that were covering it, and in some ways, fair enough, because it's sometimes hard to understand the implications. So I'm talking about the announcement where uh, SpaceX and T-Mobile got on a stage and their CEOs said, "Hey, we're launching this new thing, and the new thing is that Starlink satellites will also be able to act as somewhat distant cell towers." And the suggestion, if we're to believe what SpaceX and T-Mobile are telling us, the suggestion is come sometime next year, and there will be zero black spots in mobile coverage in the US, and that this is possible pretty much all around the world. It seemed to me like this is really, really huge. I mean, there's a whole lot of aspects to it. You think in New Zealand, we look at uh, our mobile carriers here, our telcos, and the billions and billions of dollars. If you stack it up between what Spark, Vodafone, 2 Degrees have poured into providing mobile coverage, and to get that last bit, and I don't know what the percentage is in New Zealand. We talk about, I think, 98.5% coverage of the population, but of course there's a lot of places in New Zealand which aren't covered in those sorts of scenarios, and hence why the government's been sort of funding the mobile black spot investment to make it sort of safer out on remote roads and so on. But if we were to, have that equivalent coverage, probably looking at maybe doubling the investment that would have to go in to do it. So if this can be done from Starlink satellites, it's got to be quite a game changer. Now, it's maybe not quite as simple as that, because it is designed, or the technology sounds like it'll be at the lighter end of capability. So you're not going to be getting 4G or 5G speeds from your mobile. But that potential to at least send a text, probably make a phone call, move a little bit of data around. Is this a big deal, or am I dreaming here?
I don't know if you're dreaming. It's just kind of like, where did this come from, and how long have they been sitting on this
Yeah.
information? Like, oh, by the way, we've always had this capability, and we're just telling you now.
Yeah.
So I'm a bit like
yeah.
you. I'm a bit,
Yeah.
how realistic is this? And we'll get rid of all the cell towers. And
Yeah.
Elon Musk is like, I've got 3,000 low orbiting,
Yeah.
what are they called? The low orbiting towers. And it's like, okay, so all of a sudden it's just going to work. So
Yeah.
yeah, I'm sitting on the fence. If it's
Yeah.
as simple as that, yeah, great. Test
Yeah.
it in America, because if it can work there, it'll clearly work anywhere else, hopefully. But yeah, maybe I'm a bit more skeptical than optimistic.
I did a bit of research, because I've seen a little bit on this in the past, and there has been some work going on this for some time. And so, when you Google satellite LTE network, for instance, there's a few companies that come up. One of the companies I read about when this announcement came out, say they have already trialed the technology. So it might not be as far fetched as it in some ways sort of seems to think. Hold on, those satellites, at the moment the satellites going up are 550 kilometers from the Earth. That seems a long way for a cell signal to travel. Right, we're kind of we're not quite used to that. But I guess the part of the breakthrough is that this is supposed to work with our existing LTE type phones. Part of how they've done it in the US is that T-Mobile have spectrum available that's going to be a fit. So there will be aspects there of, what spectrum is available in other countries. And then just the reality, does it work how they're dreaming it'll work? Well, I mean, you might have asked the same question when we first heard about Starlink and this idea of getting, 100 megabits per second sort of plus speeds from a satellite with low latency and so on. It's like, no, satellites never worked like that before, and they've sort of somewhat delivered.
Yes.
It's not perfection, but it certainly gives another connectivity option. The other aspect there is this is reliant on their next generation Starlink, so you never quite know with Musk whether that's going to come on time or whether we got a few
Just
years
another
to
profound
wait.
statement.
Yeah, but I think it's it was a big surprise to me. It seems like a big deal, and there's a lot of aspects in terms of benefits from having the communication. I know we kind of like to be able to get away out into the wops and be
True.
off grid a bit at times, but there's some pretty positive upsides from safety perspectives and
Oh,
cost
absolutely.
perspectives.
And maybe
if
more
that's
building
able to be done.
opportunities if they get that out there,
Yeah.
in those areas.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it'll be interesting to see. I mean, they do like to come out with some big statements, but as you say, there's always some substance to a degree behind it.
Yeah, look, I hope there is. I do. But we'll have to sit and wait on that. Now, sort of talking of space things, there was supposed to be NASA's Artemis launch that should have taken place by now, and I'm sure many listeners will have been following this, and a really really big deal. Incredible sums of money that have been poured in, by NASA, to be able to go back to the moon. Roughly 50 years since
time.
NASA were last doing moon missions, which is quite mind blowing because it's a pretty large chunk of time. But here they are, and they're struggling. What does that say about the success that we've seen from Rocket Lab, from SpaceX, and from others, that NASA are actually finding it really, really hard to do this stuff?
Yeah, they've got more competition now, haven't they? So, they're going to have to up their game or change something. I only saw a snippet of it on the news this morning, but, I guess the reality is there is no appetite for any risk, when we're talking about flying into space. And so, and there was a lot of comments around the team were tired and fatigued. And so obviously they've made the right call and they'll try again, but that's disheartening as well, right? So the team will go home and they'll just try and regroup and figure out what's next. And, there's a bit of pressure on them. So I think maybe it's this Friday, they might be trying again. And then if there's a date after that, this side of Christmas, who knows? So yeah, it's getting tough, more competition, more capability, different ways of doing things. So it'll be interesting to see what they change over, obviously they realize what went wrong this morning, but it'll take a bit more as well, just with the team morale and getting them up and feeling confident and hitting again a new milestone. But be so exciting, you saw on TV the people there with their cameras waiting. It was just like 50 something years ago the last time it happened. It's for them, it's super exciting, and I hope it does go well. Any massive milestone like this for any organization, it's very disheartening, and what a celebration it'll be on Friday if it goes ahead.
Yeah. I mean, there's a whole lot we could sort of delve into, but I think probably the big thing that stands out for me is just, we should not take for granted and assume what Rocket Lab have done is in any way easy, right? And the work that they continue to do, and all of the others that are operating in our aerospace sector in New Zealand, because there's all sorts of stuff that's going on, and these challenges are
Oh,
generally not trivial.
complexity just beyond anything I could fathom.
Yeah,
I just look
yeah.
at what I'm delivering versus what you're trying to do from space, and to that point, nothing can go wrong. Nothing can go wrong. So, good luck to the team, and to your point, wow, truly admire our other companies that are doing it.
Yeah. And those who are interested in the broader aerospace sector, just another reminder. I know we mentioned it last week, but next week is the NZ Aerospace Summit in Christchurch. So I think you might still have a chance to get a ticket if you haven't already. Whatever level of interest you have in that, well worth thinking about. So they've got a pretty stellar lineup, sort of mix of speakers and panelists and so on. That I think some will be in person. There will be some that are beaming themselves there remotely. But looks like a really impressive lineup. So well worth thinking about.
It's amazing how space has just become so reachable that we can talk about it and be part of it. 20 years ago, it's like, oh, that's just for astronauts. Now, what a difference. It's exciting, really exciting.
Now, a couple of gadgets I wanted to mention, I've had a look at recently. Amazon Echo Show 15. Now, we've got used to the Amazon Echo, and we've been speaking about it on the New Zealand Tech Podcast since I think I got hold of early, wasn't quite pre-release, but it wasn't broadly publicly available, in the early days. And the Echo with Alexa being this voice assistant, well, it seems to keep evolving. And when I saw the Echo Show 15, there was a little bit of scratching my head and thinking, why do we need a 15-inch plug-in tablet? When I first, heard about it. Now, I think it's going to be still probably a niche product at this point in time, but it looks really good. So think of the Samsung frame TVs that you pay a real premium for. Well, this is down a similar track. So it's a picture frame. You can have it sort of displaying pictures, and you can have it doing lots of things. I think the primary role for most will be probably where they would use where people would be using Alexa anyway, where they would be using an Amazon Echo device. This is something potentially can fit on the wall in the kitchen environment, was where it sort of, to me would make some sense. We were chatting actually before the show, weren't we, Joe, about friends that have got the Samsung smart fridges with the display on them and so on. Well, in a way, this gives you much of what that does. And I know the smart fridge has some extra things because it can show you what's inside the fridge. And in theory, remotely, you can, be running around the supermarket and have a look in your fridge and go, have I got some of that? Although, those features don't seem to get well used. And in fact, even some of the other capabilities. And in some ways, it reminds me of discussions we've had around, and in the early days, it was, do you buy a smart TV or do you have a TV and add whatever smart technology with it, which you can refresh as you need to? And to me, this is it gives you, in many ways, I'd say a superset of what, or almost, I don't know, yes and no. In some ways, it's more capability than you'd get in a smart fridge. Doesn't have that camera bit. But otherwise, you've got a really flexible and responsive device. Basically, you can either put it on a little stand, which is how I've been testing it out, or you can mount it on the wall, that sort of picture type look, and then you can not just do the usual sorts of things, and you can see your shopping list on there visually, which is quite nice. And our fridge has actually still got a whiteboard where things get written on a shopping list, and then we've got Alexa and so on. So you end up with these sort of multiple systems. So actually bringing that together so you can, you visually see it, but you can do Netflix and whatnot on there as well. So it's I don't know, I think it's pretty cool, but I'm not sure how many people will be signing up in terms of the
Yeah, it's just
broader
more and more
populace.
gadgets,
Yeah,
right? It's just like your house has been overpopulated, and I'm thinking about sustainability and where we want to go in the world and
Yeah.
reducing carbon.
Yeah,
It's just
yeah.
like, well, do we need this? And in my mind, I'm sitting here thinking, I can see my children adding more and more and more items to the grocery list, and it'd be me just like submitting the grocery list off, didn't check it, and what's coming home that night.
Yeah.
Yeah, it'd be interesting. I think, like anything, we've got to find that balance for home. How many gadgets do we need? How many, to your point with the fridge, what features were unnecessary? And not everyone in the house is savvy, right? So, it's trial it, and it comes down to personal preference, doesn't it?
Yeah. Couple of other things. You can mount it vertically or horizontally, and it's got a physical sort of switch across the camera because you can do, video calling through it as well. I don't think it's got a Zoom option or a Teams option, which is probably quite good.
It's a good thing.
Which actually introduces a whole nother point, which maybe we'll discuss another day. But we're getting a whole range of devices. Facebook have got their devices, or Meta. These quite low cost devices where you can do all sorts of things. And I tried out, one of the Facebook ones, and I'm trying to remember what it's called. It might come back to me. One of their gadgets, and it was, I don't know, a few $100s, and you had the option of being able to do Teams on there and being able to do Zoom, which is quite a big gap between that and what goes into your boardrooms. You can spend a lot of money on that kit. Facebook Portal is and I guess it would be also a competing device to some of these Echo shows, because you have got a screen, and there are a few variations with ones that have got built-in battery and so on, so you can move them around, but they are effectively a sort of a chunky, not quite a tablet, but sort of a tablet on a stand and so on.
Well, and we've got their hybrid working from home, working for the office, or mostly working at home in some cases. So, it's almost like you're buying these knickknacks, as I say, to set up your office at home. And I guess this is where we're seeing more and more opportunities come out and more these products. So, it'd be intense, I think, because sometimes you can kind of go, I need this, I need this, and need this. And then at the end of the day, it's like, actually, let's reassess and bring it back to basics. But we all like the new bright and shiny, don't we?
Yeah. And look, the other device you and I were chatting about before we started, that I'm trying out over the last few months, is Oppo's Find X Pro, which is kind of top of the line Android smartphone. Very nice bit of tech. I find it interesting trying out these new gadgets, because they've all got a few strengths and a few things I'm not so sure about. One of the concerns that I had with Oppo in the past and some of the Android makers was it could be quite hard to actually get updates through. And so particularly in a business context where you're thinking about cybersecurity, you're thinking about, well, what's the actual lifespan we're going to get out of these products and so on. But they seem to be moving along, moving along on that front quite nicely. We're seeing consistent updates come out. So this one, here we are at the end of August, and I've already had, I guess it would be quicker if it was an Apple device, because they roll them out to all the devices at all the same time. But it has had an update for August already, and we just keep seeing those updates roll through, and they've got Android 13 on the way. They have their kind of customization, I guess, on Android called Color OS, but they've already announced their next iteration, I guess, to go with the new Android. I find it's it's overall a pretty good experience. It's good to good to see that all the competition didn't just disappear when Huawei kind of were effectively banned from the market, weren't they? It's
Someone's
know.
always waiting in the corner, though, aren't they?
Yeah, and I mean, Oppo were growing, but I think they've done incredibly well now in the New Zealand market. Right, now we need to talk about Tourism Holdings.
Okay.
I'm very keen to hear what you've been up to, and how are things going?
How are things
Because
going?
the borders are now sort of somewhat open, but the whole business was, I mean, from the outside, I mean, like how is the business even still operating? But you've had to maintain a team and be ready to get going. So providing services for those that are in country here in New Zealand and other markets that you work in. So walk us through a little bit of that journey.
It's been a ride. That's for sure. But the good news is we're on the other side of it. To your point, the borders are opening, and the fact that we are a global company has really been what's made it a success. With the borders opening in America a lot earlier and then in Australia. So that really helped. But what we did, from our point of view, is we had to reassess, well, how are we going to bring our revenue in if we don't have the tourists here who aren't renting these camper vans? And, initially it was quite easy because everyone was stuck in their country. So they bought the camper vans. It's like, well, we'll just go touring locally. Great news. And so that was where a lot of the income came in. And what we did from a technical point of view is it gave us this new opportunity to reassess our backlogs. Like, right, what is everything that we've got? What's going to be relevant when these borders reopen again? And so there was a lot more time spent analysing that and understanding the sort of capability that we'll need when we get to the position that we are today. So in the last 6 months, especially with the borders across America, New Zealand and Australia opening, we're seeing the tourists coming back, not so much at the level we want them to, especially in New Zealand. It is a slow burn. And, the tourists that you want in New Zealand, and not just for Tourism Holdings, is long stay with money. Right? You think about all these companies that are just waiting for these tourists. They want them to spend. We want them to be here for a long time. So, we've got to really attract that sort of tourist. And, we'll be working with Tourism New Zealand and obviously the other relevant partners across the globe just to, keep encouraging that and making it attractive as well. Let's not talk about COVID all the time, and let's not have that fear factor that we're going back into another lockdown in New Zealand, and just making sure, we're educating them and making travel a little bit easier. And, that's still happening slowly. I'm booking holidays and flights are changing. So, it's a few people would be feeling the same experience. So, we're getting there. For us, we've just released our financial results for last year, and, we had another loss, but we're actually feeling very optimistic. We had alternate revenue as well with the camper vans that we did have. So, renting them out for other goodwill areas around, around the vaccinations. So you would have seen some of our camper vans for vaccinations in Australia. We've obviously done the same thing as well. So we are looking forward to this financial year. We're looking forward to more tourists. As I mentioned, as part of that review, technically, we've taken our in-house fleet management system. So there's a huge amount that goes on in the process for, I want to hire a camper van, not only from booking it to scheduling it to returning it. It's massive. So we launched that in New Zealand and Australia almost a year ago, and we're about to launch it into the US at the end of this calendar year, which is very exciting. And then we'll take it into the UK early next year. So it's been a massive opportunity, and it means that we are globally using that single platform, which hopefully I'll come back and talk to you more about as well.
Right. So this is something that gives you an edge because you've had that investment into it, and you've been able to create something that's really a unique sort of fit to your needs.
Yeah, 100%, and using different systems across the globe. So I'm really looking forward to the big launch that we'll have at the end of this year, and then the further one next year. It brings us together. We've got a better understanding. We've got greater insights around obviously our fleet and those efficiencies that we were talking about earlier, and those new opportunities as well. So there's a lot going on, in the tourists with the other parts of our company. We've got the Waitomo Caves. We want to get more foot traffic through there. This is a beautiful place. It's a great opportunity. Anyone that comes into New Zealand should experience it. It's a wow factor. And then, we've got the side where we're actually manufacturing our camper vans. And so obviously we have supply chain issues like the rest of the world, which is obviously a headache, and that's something that we're working through. But, we're aware of what it is that we need to work through. We have these mitigations in place, and we have all these alternates as well. So really looking forward to what it will look like in a year's time. We've had plenty of time to plan. We've done a great amount of work with the alternates in the meantime. And, I've got a new team. One of the things that hit me personally the hardest from a technology point of view was the Great Resignation, they called it. And in a 12-month period, I lost 60% of my technical capability. And that was purely to more money. The money that was being offered out there was quite substantially higher than obviously we could afford in the tourism industry. So I had to rebuild my teams up again, and that took a long time. Obviously, with the borders closed at the time, the pool of capability is very, very small. So I had to rethink what it is that we needed, and that was during that process of understanding what it is we wanted to prioritize. But the great news is, I now got a new structure. I've got capability that's coming from graduates from university, juniors that have just had a little bit of experience, the intermediates and the seniors. So there's a real balance finally of that capability in those different roles as well. It's not all filled, there's about 3 or 4 roles, which is good compared to where we were, that we're still focusing on. And we are accredited, so we're using that new process that just came in the middle of this, the middle of this year as well. So taking advantage.
New people into the country.
Yeah. So with those tech skills, so we've got some great candidates offshore that we're just waiting to go through the process with, and that's going through a few blips and blobs, and
there can be challenges when these things are first launched, right?
Here's a policy and here's a process. I'm like, well, there's a few steps missing you didn't tell us about. So like everything. But listen, it's something that we're working with their relevant teams on, and I'm excited. And one of the key things that came out in our report, our financial reports from our CEO, was just how proud he was about the resilience of our teams, and I am too. I 2 days after starting this role, I go into lockdown, and I'm in tourism, and having leaving a financial services background. It's like, what have I done? It's like, absolutely did the right thing. This is great. I can't wait for the world in general just to be back to, hopefully, that energizer, lots of traveling, lots of money being spent, environment again. So lots to do. What are we coming into the second month of the financial year, or end of the second month? Never a dull moment.
Yeah. And comparing that, your tech team, and how many people have you got working, in the technology aspects of Tourism Holdings?
So we have around 60. So, and that includes internal and external teams. So we have offshore teams. So we've leaned on offshore teams. We were already doing that. So thankfully, because we were able to retain them, and they've been phenomenal, and they're just an extension of our internal teams here. They're just part of the crew, and they do a fantastic job. So we have the majority of our teams based in Auckland, New Zealand. As I mentioned, we've got the offshore teams in Lebanon. We've got some IT support in the US and also in Australia. But over the last 6 months, when we were recruiting, we were opening up, where do you live? Where do you want to live? So we do have a few that are scattered out through New Zealand. And that's fine. That works. We, as you mentioned, Teams and Zoom, that makes anything possible, no matter where you are, no matter what time of the day. But it's great. The thing for me now is building that culture back, with quite a new team and spread out in different parts of the globe. We need to make sure that remains a focus, and balance that with how many days do I have to be in the office? Do I have to be in any, or watch the space around that?
I think that's a journey of a lot of organisations, and it's it's interesting that that you saw so many of your people on the tech side sort of drawn into other roles. Because I think everyone was struggling to find people, and so there was just all manner of challenges, and people got pulled and enticed in all sorts of directions. But how did that compare with the rest of your workforce? Because you have people that are out there, working on the ground, not necessarily anything to do with being based in an office. They're out there, facing the public. How's that side worked out? Because probably wasn't so much for many of them to do at times.
No, that's right. And so, there was obviously a phase of having to let people go, but for the people that remained, they stayed. Retention was very high. So almost the opposite of what I experienced from the digital side. So a lot of retention, a lot of resilience that I saw through that. And, I obviously got the resilience of my team that have, stuck through as well from a digital side. So, we're very proud of that fact. And now we're in a position where we're going from redundancies to recruitment. We're going from loss to profit. And so it's a great feeling, and it's something that those of the team and the crew, whether in technology or in the front line that have been through it, can be proud of, and feel optimistic that it was worth it. That's the gamble they took, and it's the right gamble. And like I said, in this time in a year's time, hopefully it's even a better result than what we're anticipating.
Now, tourism sector is there's a lot of variety. There's all sorts of businesses, from individual folks who just love the country and they're great tour guides, and they that I don't know how some of those folks get business, but having chatted to one or two people that do some, in some cases, some very high end type personal tour guide type stuff, through to obviously, the big business like Tourism Holdings. How do you feel we're sort of going on the technological front in terms of, tech enablement? Is there still a lot more that we need to be doing? Are we kind of ahead, behind the rest of the world? What do you see?
Yeah, good question. I think there's probably a lot more. I think, we kind of had put in a holding pattern for a while with COVID, and a lot of companies closing from that tourism side, especially in New Zealand. And so, which is really sad. And a lot of those small business owners who put their heart and soul into growing that, and they had dreams that one day that they would maybe using technology to grow their business, and that opportunity's gone. I think it'll come back. Innovation for me is high on the agenda. I put it in as a mandatory thing as part of a plan for the year, and I see that it's never ending, the opportunities, and you're hearing what goes on in tourism around the world. So quick answer is yes, I think we've still got a lot to do. I think the more is the focus is just building businesses up to have the money to enable that to happen, right? Let's build ourselves back into a state of having a profit so we can then use that to enable technology to grow us even more.
Yeah, it's hard, isn't it? Because at your sort of scale, there's a level that you can invest that other smaller organisations can't. But sometimes it's the smaller organisations that maybe need it, more to be able to, actually, even to exist and to keep going. Right?
That's right. And they're paying top dollar for capability at the moment. So that's the other thing that you've got to balance is like the rates have just gone up so high. It's like, well, actually, what can we afford? And so there will be a lot of that thinking that will be going on. And, it doesn't happen overnight, technology either. Even the example we were talking about earlier today around the high tech awards, and was it MX2?
Yeah, M2X.
M2X, that's it, sorry. 8 years, So depending on what it is that you want to produce, it can not necessarily happen overnight. So a lot of planning, a lot of balancing, bring the tourists back. Let's just get ourselves into a profit before we focus on that.
And I guess, one of the things that we all have to do is, in our environments is create that environment where folks want to be, where talent wants to come and spend their day, building and doing things that mean something, that make a difference.
And knowing
you
about
know,
them.
yeah.
There's just so many companies you don't even know about until you see these awards, and all of a sudden it's like, wow, that's happening in New Zealand, or wow,
Yeah.
that happens in Australia. That's not so far away. It's amazing, how much is happening and evolving without even knowing about it. And it takes a lot to be reading, all the updates and having access to the relevant articles to know who's doing what. And if you're not doing that, you're going to be none the wiser. So being able to network now as well is obviously going to help with that. Seeing more of those summits that are happening as well will enable
The odd
us to,
podcast can help
the odd
too, right?
podcast. Exactly. So now that this is kicking off again, that will definitely help. And I think there's huge opportunities for tourism. For me, tourism is just about making more efficiencies, making it the customer experience just so crisp and clean. It's like, oh, I'm coming back, or I'm taking this for a lot longer, this experience. That's really what it's about for tourism.
That's great. Well, I can think of 100 more things I'd like to ask you, but we're out of time for this week, so we'll have to do another one again. But thank you very much, Jo Hilson. It's
great to be here.
been good to have you on the show. And look, thank you also to our show partners, to 2 Degrees, Vodafone, Spark, HP, Gorilla Technology, Cyclone, and Aruba for their support of the show. Now, if you've been watching this on our live stream, then do make sure you fire up your smartphone, whatever you are using there, and look for a podcast app to subscribe on. If you listen to the audio, which is the large majority of our audience, you may want to you can follow me on LinkedIn to get access to the live streams, so you get them ahead of most other folks. And we're also across Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube. I've noticed we're sort of slowly ticking along with a few more people following on YouTube. There is a little bit of a trick, though. If you want to catch us live on YouTube, I think you have to go and hit the bell. Otherwise, you'll find out about it later. Whereas LinkedIn is very good at giving you a bit of a nudge if you've got LinkedIn open, isn't it, and letting you know there's a stream. So but that's us for this week. Thanks, Jo. Thanks everyone for listening in.
Thank you.
All right, cheers.
The New Zealand Tech Podcast, brought to you by Gorilla Technology, proactive and strategic IT.